The year is 2025. The world descends into chaos with the US entering a second civil war followed by Putin's death. Medvedev, elected president of Russia, prepares a military operation against Ukraine. Despite initial success, NATO intervenes, leading the army's high command to order the withdrawal of Russian troops from the front. With no other option, Medvedev is forced to sign a ceasefire. Ukraine annexes Russian territories and the Caucasus states proclaim independence. In light of the great humiliation, Medvedev resigns, leaving a power vacuum that would be filled by none other than the leader of the Wagner Group, Prigozhin. However, the Russian High Command deposes Prigozhin, and Shoigu establishes a provisional military dictatorship with plans to transfer power to Dugin. The Nazbols remain marginals in Russian society. They didn't appreciate our struggle, but it's difficult to blame them for that. Society was poisoned by the actions of the United Russia Party. It succumbed to paternalism and stability after the turbulent 1990s. Now is the time to begin the active phase of the struggle for Russia, which is overflowing the boundaries of street protests. National Bolshevism can no longer tolerate what the authorities are doing. Alexander Dugin, a former associate of Limonov, is gaining popularity. We cannot allow him to take root in the minds of Russians. To combat the influence of Shoigu and Dugin, the Nazbols took to the streets to spread the ideology of Limonov, the founder of the party and movement itself. We also infiltrated Dugin and the state's organizations under the false pretense of loyalty, even using the internet as a weapon in a blog read by millions of Russians, where we called for unity with Dugin's Eurasianism in the face of the crisis. Something many don't know is that Dugin was a former Nazbol who betrayed the party in favor of the Kremlin and his own ideology. Therefore, under no circumstances will we allow Dugin to rise to power. In a matter of months, our preparations will be finalized. No longer will the Russian people be exploited by corrupt politicians and the oligarchs at the top. It is time for a Russian revolution. Our national Bolsheviks completely stormed the Kremlin, which was empty due to the events that led them there. Dugin, the traitor to our cause, cowardly went into hiding, knowing that his supporters were a devastating minority. However, Russia still has more enemies to fight: liberals, the European Union, and even more traitors. But the revolution is victorious, and it is time to prepare and avoid a second humiliation. Das März. Now that we managed to defeat the Kremlin, the Russian National Union is proclaimed. However, there's still much work to be done. The war against NATO left Russia completely destroyed. To ensure stability, we cleansed our army, pacifying all the generals responsible for our humiliation and poverty. In view of our actions, the oligarchs fled Russia, but we never needed them. We couldn't waste time. The economy is in shambles and we need to fix it. Economic reforms like reviewing privatization, transforming our economy into one controlled by the workers themselves, and implementing the 2-year plan inspired by the German 4-year plan. We couldn't ignore the housing crisis. Tyrannical businessmen were renting apartments and reselling them at exorbitant prices to our Russian people. But not anymore. With the state controlling the apartments, we can distribute them to all in need. All our reforms resulted in an economic miracle, completely negating the effects that the European war brought us, and opening opportunities for further reforms in our society. However, this does not mean that the opposition is done. Neo-Nazi traitors aligned with NATO are still infesting our country. This demands a second 1947, where we cleanse the Russian nation of all traitors, reviving the NKVD troikas, reactivating old gulags, and in the process abolishing the republics within Russia, creating a unitary state, showing the traitors of our nation that we will never be slaves to globalists. With the Russian situation completely stabilized and secure, a reform in our party is necessary, creating an ultra-nationalist socialist vision. Aksel, the leader of our National Bolshevik Russia, reforms the old democratic system, proving that National Bolshevism works not only in theory but also in practice, thus proclaiming to the world, Russia is everything, the rest is nothing. We are getting closer and closer to a completely perfect and united Russian society. Our culture is as important as any other sector of society, if not the most important factor. That's why we promote the postmodernist movement. Patriotic and revolutionary music rewrite the USSR's national anthem to align with our ideology, invade famous internet sites like Reddit, Facebook, and Twitter, and many others, and even promote our own anime adaptations, releasing the first copies of Haruhi Suzumiya with ideological themes from our party and aesthetics from our movement. And as for our final reform, the army, we studied the failures of the war against Ukraine and NATO, radicalized our recruits, and invested heavily in aircraft production. Now there is only one last step, to challenge the globalists and the imperialists of the West, in Paris, in Kiev, in Berlin, London, and Rome. We completely disregard our war reparations and our debts owed to the European Union, and we encourage resistance with weapons and propaganda in the Russian territories occupied by the Western powers, in Belgorod, Donbass, and the Caucasus. This leads us to Operation Ejection. Our brothers in Minsk are unhappy with the new puppet state of the European Union. We then easily influence the Belarusian population to convert to our liberationist ideology. With this, through popular support, the Belarusian population turned to the streets and successfully deposed the installed Western government, integrating the country into Moscow by pure free will. The failure of the Collective Security Treaty Organization resulted in the abolition of the alliance, so we created the Eurasian Security Initiative, continuing our reintegration with the countries that emerged from our defeat, annexing Kalmykia and the Don Republic. We continued our campaign in the Caucasus, annexing Stavropol and ending the war in Chechnya, which had collapsed into civil war thanks to the Western imperialism. Meanwhile, we also began a campaign in Central Asia, invading Kazakhstan and the rest of the countries in the region to protect the territories with a Russian majority and uniting the various ethnic groups within the new union. A large-scale operation of Russia's grand revenge against Europe for centuries of humiliation that have brought upon it. Enough with the dear partners, concessions, and other formalities that conceal the sale of our country. What operation that would we initiate will be the last war in Europe. The winner takes it all. За Родину. The extensive front would require a sophisticated strategy. The Russian High Command opted to select an army group to conduct offensives in selected territories. First, we quickly captured the Kuban Puppet Republic of Ukraine. And then rapidly diverted the offensive group to Rostov. With air support, it didn't take long for the city to be liberated by our tanks. The next step would be the Baltic countries, a strategic region whose liberation would significantly reduce the extension of our front, allowing for large-scale offensives. Our army was immediately sent to Estonia after the liberation of Rostov. Our tanks and soldiers, with little effort, reached Tallinn in a matter of days, forcing Estonia's surrender and diverting our attention to Latvia, which, like Estonia, fell with little effort. Lithuania, however, was not easy. Many troops were actively defending Vilnius from all NATO countries. This resulted in one of the bloodiest battles of the entire war, but as weeks passed, our tanks broke through the city's defenses, forcing the Lithuanian government to surrender. With that, we returned to the Ukrainian front. NATO, occupied with its slow offensive in the Belarusian territory, did not expect our offensive in the Donbass, where we liberated Kursk in less than a week and completely surrounded about 60 NATO divisions. More than 500,000 soldiers were forced to surrender or were completely destroyed by our aerial and armored barrage. NATO's army is completely demoralized. More than 2 million casualties have been confirmed, and nothing will stop us from advancing directly into Kiev. With the fall of Dnipro and Kiev, Zelensky flees the country, allowing us to liberate all Ukrainian territories. The last step before a grand offensive is to encircle the army advancing towards Minsk. Within a month, our troops successfully surrounded the troops in Belarus, completely cutting off supplies, gas, and reinforcements to over 100 divisions. This left the Polish border completely open, so as soon as we captured Krakow and Warsaw, Poland surrendered, and preparations for the grand offensive were finalized.
Продолжается бой, и сердце тревожно в груди. И Ленин такой молодой и юный, октябрь впереди. И Ленин такой молодой и юный, октябрь впереди. И лесной снегопад, мирный беден и богат. Знамя юности планеты, наш всемирный строй. дней нищие. Примета в этой жизни только с правдой по пути. И вновь продолжает собой, и сердце тревожно в груди. И Ленин такой молодой и юный, октябрь впереди. И Ленин такой молодой и юный, октябрь впереди. И сердце тревожно в груди. И Ленин такой молодой и юный, октябрь впереди. И Ленин такой молодой и юный, октябрь впереди.
We've done it! Hundreds of years of humiliation avenged. Europe is in the hands of Russia, and puppet republics are being established across the continent. It's the end of the age of false patriotism. I'd like to thank all who have watched the video this far. This has been a fun video to make, and I hope you had fun watching it as well. And I will see you all next time.